Welcome to the Queens of Moxie. I'm Mary Kay Campbell, the host of this program, and I'm so excited that you've decided to join us today. Every week, we bring amazing women to our podcast to talk about how they have stepped into joy and reclaimed their moxie and are living their authentic life. I want to get started, but before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to the weekly email. Simply go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. That way, every Monday morning, you'll get a link to the latest podcast, a beautiful image, and a fabulous quote. It's a great way to start out your week. So let's get started with today's podcast. So we're here at Queens of Moxie today with Elizabeth Cottrell, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you guys to meet her and to hear more about her story. I was lucky enough to be part of a women's symposium in Shenandoah County's Chamber of Commerce event recently, and Elizabeth was one of the speakers. And first off, everybody in that room loves Elizabeth, loves her, y'all. It is unbelievable. And then the other thing is she's just such a dynamic leader and someone that I think we all can aspire to because she's a trailblazer. And I think that really speaks volumes. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of background about Elizabeth so you know more about where she's coming from. So she graduated, and I'm going to tell them the year, Elizabeth, because I think it's important.
That's fine. That's fine.
She graduated in 1971 with her bachelor's in biology from Randolph College. And then she got her MS in human anatomy from Tulane in 73. And her intention was to teach anatomy and physiology to medical school students, dental school students, and School of Nursing. And what her LinkedIn profile doesn't say is that she's ABD, which for those of you who have been in the academic world, you know that means all but dissertation. And that means that she did all of the work to get her dissertation, to get her PhD, except the dissertation, which honestly is a huge step, but also to get all of the coursework done is just, oh my gosh. When I got my master's degree, I remember many weekends where I thought, I'm going to quit. I just can't do this anymore. And, at that time I was reading like 500 pages a week, and it was so much work, and I was working full time. And at the end, I was pregnant and teaching at NC State University. And so for me, I know what it takes to get your master's degree, and so multiply that by 10 to get the PhD coursework done. So I am just amazed and just think it's fabulous. And I think the reason I wanted to say the years that she got this is because that's a big part of why Elizabeth is a trailblazer. In 1971 and 1973, there weren't as many women in the technology and science, the STEM field, and in the field in general, let alone getting their doctorate and being ABD. And so it really is huge. And so what Elizabeth has done is she was ABD, then her husband needed to finish his residency. And so she was the lab research director. And then when they moved, she tried to get a professorship, and there were no positions available. And about the same time, they decided to start their family, and she got into community service and really devoted her time and attention to being a parent and a spouse and to the community. And then when the kids got older and it was time for college, she decided to go back into the workforce, and she worked in desktop publishing. And we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But first, Elizabeth, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what it was like to be in the STEM field in the early 70s.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. This is a real treat, and it was an honor for me to be on the stage with you because your message was powerful for the women in leadership positions. So it's an honor to be here. I was so fortunate, Mary Kay, because it was easier for me than it would have been even 10 years previous. they were beginning to have more women, and they were actually seeking women. I think that made it perhaps a little easier for me to get a scholarship to graduate school. However, it was still a bit of an old boys network, and so, you know, depending on your degree of self-confidence, and I was fortunate to have been raised in a family with a father who believed in me, and three brothers who kept me in line, or I kept them in line. I'm not sure which. And also a family of strong women, even though my one grandmother went to college, one grandmother didn't, but they were both forces to be reckoned with for one reason or another. And all of my aunts went to college. And my mother. I was very fortunate to have that background, and I can't remember ever hearing anything other than you can do whatever you want to do. I think the danger when you get to an adult with that message is if you translate that to you have to do everything, it's a ticket to the nut house. So I've learned that one of my great challenges in life is balance. But I never felt overwhelmed by being, you know, in the minority. And in fact, I was fortunate to have male mentors who believed in me and encouraged me. So
That's great.
I didn't have a brutal. I think the corporate world can be so much more brutal than the science world, because we have had amazing, back to Marie Curie, and
Exactly.
had some amazing women in science. So I didn't feel disadvantaged.
That's good. That's good. So when you went into the community service world, tell us about some of the things that you did, and some of the most memorable moments, and the ways in which it was really powerful for you.
Perhaps the most powerful was serving on the Shenandoah County School Board. At the time, that was an appointed position, and it was not terribly political in the sense that I didn't have to run for it or anything like that. But it was always controversial. There were always things that had to be dealt with, and perhaps two of the most controversial issues were consolidation of the schools into fewer high schools, that idea, and having to close some schools. And then we had a program called Weekday Religious Education, which had been allowed because it was so popular, but it was not legal.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
The federal standards. And so when the American Civil Liberties Union threatened to sue because a mother had said, my child doesn't participate and they're losing instructional time, because while those kids are out doing that, my kid gets sent to the library, we all looked at each other and said, yeah, this is not right. And our attorney said, let me just put it this way, American Civil Liberties Union has deeper pockets than you do. But it was extremely painful, and I got extremely hateful feedback. Anonymous phone calls that I was going to burn in hell for taking Bible away from children and one thing or another. So that was and I served on the board for 9 years and served as chairman for a while. But it was satisfying in the sense that I felt like my investment of time in that would outlive me and be important for the youth coming up. Also, later on, I was involved with the Community Foundation. And that, again, was a philanthropic effort that built endowment for all kind and gave grants to all kinds of community nonprofits. And that helped me to understand some of the needs in the county. It also helped me to appreciate the power of endowment, and I call it forever money. But perhaps the biggest challenge and satisfaction was when I was asked to serve on the board of a local community bank. At that time, it was almost 100 years old at the time, had never had a woman. I was the first woman ever, and I was pretty young. I was 40 or something like that. And I'll never forget going to the first state meeting with 4 boards from banks all over the state, and I'm looking around and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the probably the youngest and one of the very few females. I'm happy to say that that has changed in the, I think that was in 1990, between 90 and 92. I can't remember exactly when I started, but that was a big deal. And then, and that was a wonderful learning experience. And I felt like, and they said when they got me on the board, that what I brought to the table may not have been the same skills that some of the other people at the table brought, but that I brought that sense of community, that knowledge of the needs of the community, and a female perspective that frankly was valuable.
Right.
And then in 2016, I was elected the first ever female board chair. So now I should have looked it up, but there are not very many in the state of Virginia for that either. But that's changing.
The
It's
board
all
for what?
changing. Hmm?
The board chair for what?
For the bank, for the first
That's what I thought.
First Bank and First National Corporation, which was its holding company, which during the time, from the time that I started on the board, was a $500 million bank, and now it's a $1.5 billion bank. So it's more of a regional bank now. But so all of those have been wonderful experiences, and have taught me a lot about, and some of it I shared at that conference that I spoke to, but it just has made me realize that women, I think I made my own transition from feeling at the beginning like I had to be one of the guys to now that my daughter is an adult and a leader, and she's like helping me realize, Mom, it is about each of us working to our strengths, recognizing our strengths, and celebrating and just empowering ourselves to play to those strengths.
Right, right. You know, there's a good bit of research out there about the importance of having women at the table, and what it does for the discussions, the way that we're looking at situations, and it's everything from the EQ to work-life balance to, you know, how things are done. The reality is men and women as a whole, you know, this is generalization, think differently. We do by nature, we do by nurture. I mean, it's all important. And I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what it was like to be the only female in the room with your group, and then, you know, one of the only when you were at the conferences, and you know, you said that you were surrounded by strong women growing up, and I think that is huge. But not everybody listening today is going to have that benefit. So what are the things that you would say to people to build themselves up to know in their heart and in their soul that they have a place and that they're welcome?
Fabulous question. It's a fabulous question. And I thought about that actually a lot, thinking about talking to you, because I have been fortunate, and not everybody is. But I think one of the mistakes that I have made that I would really encourage women to be careful about, I think it's more of an awareness thing, is never subtly put yourself down. And here's an example. I realized after a while that one of the ways I was doing that is at the table, I would start out with an opinion by saying, I know I haven't had as much experience in XYZ as you have, but I should never have qualified that, because my opinion was just as valid. And even more so because it came from a different perspective, but I didn't have to minimize it by starting that way. And I see women doing that a lot, and I see strong women not doing that, because there's no need to do that. It doesn't add to the discussion. And to your point about the statistics bearing out the value of women in the boardroom and in the C-suite, it's not just perspective and some of the softer skills. There is proof that it helps the bottom line.
So someone posted this on LinkedIn recently, and it says, these are phrases I'm going to stop using. Does that make sense? Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, I say that all the time. So what this person said to say is, what questions can I answer for you?
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect. Yeah.
about that. That takes you from a position of, I don't really know if this makes sense, and to, I know what I'm talking about. If there's any confusion, I'm happy to clear that up.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It
Really.
is brilliant. This one is, I could be wrong, but
Yep.
oh, I've said that. And so the person said, what are your thoughts on this?
Mhm.
Love that. Sorry, I'll fix that right away. And I actually have fixed this one for myself. Instead of saying, apologizing, like I made a real effort this year to not apologize for things, instead say, thank you for catching that. I appreciate that feedback.
Mhm.
Instead of saying, what do you want me to do? Oh my gosh, totally use that one. I recommend we do X because Y. What are your thoughts? So instead of being passive, you're taking the lead and you're showing your expertise, especially when we get to be at the point in our careers where I am and where you have been. We do know what we're talking about, and we don't need someone to micromanage us. It was no big deal. All right, how many times have we
Gosh.
deflected? I do this, and I'm trying so hard to be more of, thank you, I really appreciate that, instead of, oh, and it's kind of like when someone says, oh, I love your necklace,
Oh,
and
yes, yes.
oh, I got that on sale at, no, thank you.
Oh, please send me that, Mary Kay. That's awesome.
Well, I will. There's two more. Sorry to bother you. Okay, I always thought that was like the polite thing to say. No, instead you say, when I have a minute, can I get your opinion on?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And the last one, I'm not sure, when someone asks you something, instead say, I don't know, but I'll find out and get back to you.
Mhm.
All of these are shifting that perspective of putting you in a place where you do know what you're talking about.
They do. And I really also want to bring up that because I've seen different women with totally different personalities all be leaders, and that to not think that you've got to be this really outgoing, really assertive. In fact, and I feel this way whether I'm talking about a man or a woman, we have all known people in a meeting or whatever who simply didn't know how to shut up.
Yes.
They just felt the need to hear themselves talk, and that is not appreciated by other people in the room. And so the leaders that I have respected, again, whether they're male or female, are ones who really listen, really do their homework, really show up,
Mm-hmm.
and then don't talk unless they've got something to say
Yeah.
that adds to the conversation.
Yeah.
So that is important. One of the skills that I feel like I have been able to bring to the table, I can't claim any credit for it except God Almighty, but I have an ability to listen to a boardroom full of people discuss something and then get to the bottom line. And so I can say what I think I'm no, I'm going to not say I think what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is X, Y, Z. And therefore, it seems like our choices are A and B. Does that, what do you think? But see, you probably know the author Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet. I think Quiet's the name of it, but she wrote about introverts in leadership positions,
Mhm.
and every woman has a role to play, and you shouldn't ever be apologetic about whether your personality is such. If you're not outgoing, maybe getting up on a stage to speak is not your thing, and you don't have to do it. Look
Mhm.
for leadership opportunities that are different.
Right, right. Well, and it's interesting. I have been following some different folks on LinkedIn lately um that are more outspoken. They're younger than me, and they're the next generation of women leaders. And one of the things that they're talking about is being too much, too loud, too independent, too and you know what, Elizabeth, I am all of those things. I recognize that I'm loud and I'm independent, and I'm going to tell you my opinion, and that may not go over well. But I will say, with age, thank God, I curtail what I say. I used to be one of those people that talked mostly because I process things verbally, not necessarily because I thought my opinion was more important than anybody else's, but more because that's how I process information, but I have learned the value of people who are more introverted, who are more reflective, and really process information and then come back with things that are really thoughtful. And I think the first time I really saw this was when I was teaching at NC State University, and I was in my late 20s, early 30s, probably early 30s. And I had a student who didn't seem to be engaged, and I wanted to hear from everybody. And so I called on the student, and the student said the most remarkable, thoughtful, well processed information in the entire discussion.
Wow.
And I learned that just because someone looks like they're not paying attention does not mean that they're not engaged. It means that they're processing the information in a different way. And I also did an exercise where I gave my students 3 poker chips at the beginning of a class. And I said, you have 3 poker chips. So if you're like me and you talk a lot, you can only talk 3 times. So you need to think very carefully about if it's worth using your poker chip. And if you don't talk a lot, guess what? I want to hear from you. And you've got to use those 3 poker chips by the end of the class.
Yeah.
And it levelized, it leveled the conversation. And
in your position as a teacher, and in mine as chairman of the board, I have done that with calling on people. And there are no shrinking violets in the boardroom, but some of them just, are less prone to speak. But particularly if it's a discussion or a decision that we all need to know what the others are thinking. And so I will try to pull that out of people. I think that's and as a teacher, that's a fabulous observation.
It was such a learning opportunity for me as well as the students. And I can't even begin to tell you where I got that idea. I mean, I really don't know. I just know that I used it every semester, and it always had profound impact on the discussion.
That's great.
Really
and I also want to say, Mary Kay, and I don't want to put down anybody that is really assertive and really out there, because I think when somebody's passionate about something, it's contagious. And we need those people too. And there are certainly some women in Congress, for instance, that some people go, oh, gosh, I wish they'd shut up. But then if you look at the scope of history, it takes the pendulum sometimes swinging too far in one way or the other to get to the right place. And if you look at the movements across history, whether it's women's voting or civil rights or whatever, we need those people too.
Yeah.
My context of my earlier comment was a boardroom, but certainly we need and appreciate those that may make us wince or may go like, wow, they're extreme, but for good or for bad, we need them all.
We do. And I think that's the important aspect of this, is that we have to have that balance. I need people to pull back and look at the high level picture and to really see things from, poke holes in it from different directions. And I lead people to action. I motivate them. I get them excited. And it's the combination of those that really is where we find that sweet spot. And I think it's important for people to understand that they are really valuable exactly how they are. We all add value. And I'll never forget, I've told this story before, but in the winter last year, a brand new co-working space opened. And I know the executive director, and he's a friend of mine, and I was really excited about it. And he's like, come work for a day. And I went in there, and I had a Zoom meeting, and my earbuds stopped working. Now, I was in like a general area, like sitting on a couch, and there were people in booths around me and stuff. And so it felt like, not like the quiet zone. And so, but I was conscious of the fact that there were other people working. So I turned the volume down as low as I could on my computer, and I spoke as softly as I could. And afterwards, my friend came up to me and said, next time you really need to go into the phone booth, which is like a it's a space designed for when you are on these kinds of calls, and it has sound dampening things. And yeah, I should have gone in there. But I felt like I had been reprimanded like a child. Oh my gosh, I felt so badly. And for like 2.5 days, I beat myself up. Oh my gosh, I'm too loud. I'm colorful. Like, and even when I think I'm being quiet, I'm not being quiet. And then I had the aha moment. I realized, you know what? Those are my strengths. This is part of who I am, and I get hundreds of people to participate in events, and I speak to thousands of people, and I get people excited and motivated. And what does that is the fact that I'm loud and colorful and independent and talk about things. And so what I realized was, you know what? That is an awesome co-working space, just not for me.
Yeah.
I need to be somewhere where there's lots of people talking and lots of activity, and it doesn't matter if I'm on a Zoom call.
Aren't those insights wonderful?
Yes.
Yeah, they really
But I
are.
wouldn't have gotten there before.
Yeah.
I had to get to the place where I love who I am, and that means all of me. And I had to get to that place where I recognize not everybody loves me, but you know what? I don't love everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
What I learned from that experience is I disrupted other people, and that is very unfortunate, and I did not mean to. And I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't work in that space. I mean that's what I learned. And that's okay. And I think sometimes, at least what I have found as a strong woman who is very vocal, that I can say something, and because of being a woman, it's taken a certain way, or it's not heard at all. And then a man will say the same thing, and they're not considered pushy or aggressive or any of the things that, there are certain terminologies that I won't use here that women are described as. And there is this push and pull between being respectful, being kind, and also standing up and saying, this is what I believe to be true.
No question.
This is how I would approach it. And I think that's a challenge that I've found to be difficult. And I would imagine other women do too. How did you walk that line?
By being authentic. I don't know really how else to answer that. I feel compassionate towards other people, and I think that gets reciprocated, mostly.
Yeah.
Uh, and and I think, and I want to talk about this a little bit more, but the power of connection and nourishing relationships is so important. And one of the ways that I've done that as a board chair, for instance, is when we have a sensitive thing that I know we're going to be discussing or voting on coming up, I'll pick up the phone and call each person on the board. I said, and say, I really want to know what you think. This is going to be awkward conversation, but please help me understand where you're coming from. And so that, when I respect them, it minimizes the chances that they're going to be disrespectful of me later on. So I think that the golden rule works in almost every situation. So I would say that's kind of how that has been valuable for me.
Well, and the sense that I got in the symposium that we were part of, and in our conversations, is that you have this, I don't want to say quiet, because I don't think that's the right word, but you have a very warm, approachable, and sympathetic, empathetic approach to leadership. And you get the work done, and you do it through relationship building. You're not a bulldozer that comes in. You're there creating those bridges, and creating space for people to feel heard and to bring consensus together. And I think that is such an amazing, remarkable skill. Oh my gosh, I do. And I'm not good at it. So I really appreciate it when someone does that, because I can name the elephant in the room, but I don't do it as beautifully as you do. You do it in a way that creates synergy and compassion for each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I really appreciate, that's a beautiful compliment, and it means a lot to me. I also, have you heard the expression, I like to keep my powder dry? So the expression comes from, you don't want to use your ammunition until you really need it, because then when you need it, it's more effective, back from the days of muskets and
Right.
things like that. But by that I mean, again, back to, I try not to say things unless they're worth saying, so that I am very capable of having everybody in the room like, boy, she really feels strongly about that, doesn't she? Because I don't do it very often, until I really have to. And so then when I say, I'm sorry, but I wish I could agree with you, but I cannot. And here's why. And when I do that, it's like, well, they really do listen. And so that's just, again, being authentic to your own values and to who you are, and to, not play your cards unless they're worth playing.
Oh, I love that advice. I really do. And like I said, as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at it. But there's something I've been saying a lot lately, since my car accident, and that's rest in the pause.
Ah,
I and
love
it
that.
has so many meanings. One of them is resting, just the need to rest. We all need to take deep breaths and pause.
Mhm.
It's also resting before you react, and as someone with ADHD, my I'm quick. But I think reflecting on that and recognizing the value of pausing, and one, you give other people a chance to speak. And so you might have somebody else that champions your idea, and you don't have to be the one to do that, but it also gives you a chance to hear different perspectives.
Another lesson that I'm sure you derive from teaching, that I think translates very well into almost any leadership position, and that is um, acknowledging and complimenting people when they say things or do things that are good and that fit your vision of where you want to go.
Yeah.
Uh, People just, and not just to them, which is great, especially if there's other people listening, but perhaps in they say children like third party compliments, like if they're there and you're talking to somebody else and you're saying what something great that this child did.
Yeah.
I have, one way I've done that is to pick up the phone or write a note, which is my thing, to a supervisor about somebody that's, or to a coworker or to somebody that it would matter to
Yes.
that person, to just say, gosh, they just did a great job. And of course, to write a note to the person and say, hey,
Yeah.
that was a contentious discussion, but you really kept us on track. Thank you so much.
Yes.
That kind of feedback is so important, not only to build confidence and teamwork, but also just to help things move in the direction of the values or the vision or the mission of whatever your
Mhm.
organization is trying to accomplish.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I think this lends us really nicely into what you have done. And so I would love for you to talk about the fact that you wrote a book, and you helped others write books and publish books before, but now you did your own, and you utilized that wonderful fun vacation we all had with COVID. It wasn't a vacation, but
Great
um,
pause.
that humongous pause that we all had, and why you did it. And so first, tell us what your book is about, because that's going to be pivotal for people to understand.
Thank you. Well, I'll just grab it right here.
Please do.
Uh, it is called Heart Spoken: How to Write Notes That Connect, Comfort, Encourage, and Inspire. And I have always written notes and have thought of it as good manners, etiquette, all that stuff. I'm the age that was considered to be important. But one day I got a note from a stranger that made me change my outlook forever on how important a heart-spoken note can be. This woman, her son had committed suicide, and she and I didn't know her, didn't know her son, but I knew her son's fiance, and I had written a sympathy note to the fiance. I wish I knew what I said. I have no idea what I said, but it was from my heart. That fiance shared it with her fiance, with the mother. The mother wrote me and said, I have read your note. Sorry, frog in my throat. I've read your note 25 times or more. It saved me at the most awful time in my life. So again, I don't know what I said, but I just realized, hey, this is something that can be so much more impactful. So that planted the seed in my head to be a little more broad-minded about what note writing can do, and it made me start writing more than just thank you notes and sympathy notes. I realized that I could write notes for all kinds of reasons, and so I started. And people, and I also had feedback from people. Oh, you write such nice notes. I wish I knew what to say. I never don't have the confidence. So that was the idea, seed in my head. Oh gosh, maybe I should write a book about this. During right after COVID started, my 70th birthday, my daughter from New Mexico called me and said, Mom, you've had that book in your head for 10 years. I want you to write it. And to make sure that you do, for your birthday, I'm giving you some time with my friend who is an accountability coach. And she's going to call you every Friday to find out what you've done that week and what you're going to do before she calls you the next Friday. Well, I mean, the most precious gift she could have given me, because I'm the kind of person that if I told you or told her I'm going to write a book, I'll do it. If I just say, oh, you need to write a book to myself, it wouldn't have gotten done.
Right.
So that's how it was born. And I really took the first year to write it, put it together, took the second year of COVID to figure out what to do with it. And it was published this past year. So you're never too old to try something new. 72 years old and my first book published. And that is a message I would love to pass to your listeners, because I think so often we think, because we're whatever, we're not as mobile, we're not as engaged, whatever. You're never too old to try something new.
Yeah. I mean, I think that fear is probably the biggest limiting factor. And it's not just fear has so many different ways of presenting itself. So it could be fear of, if I tell people I'm going to do this and I really have to do it. So the accountability part of it, that fear of, what if I do this and nobody reads it? The fear of somebody's going to think, why the heck are you writing this? You have no knowledge about this, or, I'm not an expert, whatever. And I think fear of putting yourself out there just in general. There are lots of reasons why we don't do the things that we feel are in us that need to come out. And it could be, for you, it was writing a book. For somebody else, it could be going for a position that men apply for jobs when they meet 60% of the qualifications. Women won't unless they meet 100%. Well, we got to stop doing that.
We have to stop doing that. Absolutely. I don't know why we do that. I mean, for a while I thought it was generational, but I think there's something in our DNA that maybe it's, I don't know, but you're right. You have to stop.
I think we hold ourselves to these unreasonable standards. And I often say I'm a recovering perfectionist and type A personality. And I have a 17-year-old daughter who I see doing the things that I wish I could take her and say, no, and since she's been teeny tiny, she's been like this. And, I always say, strive for excellence, not perfection. But, what did my kids see me doing all of their lives? Striving for perfection. And so,
one of the best books that helped me with that is Gretchen Rubin's book called Better Than Before.
Oh,
And she did an extensive research on what motivates people to do things they want to do and stop doing things they don't want to do. And she very, very fascinating social science research. But then the conclusions that she came up with were, everything depends on the circumstances, the goal, the personality, your, whatever, all that, your environment. But if you can just strive to be better than before,
that's a great
tomorrow, to be
idea.
better tomorrow than you were today, to be better the next day than you
Yeah.
will be tomorrow, that is a great place to start, because then you can work your way into some other things, but otherwise you might feel overwhelmed.
Right. Right. You're immobilized because of the fear of not being perfect.
And from that, she got into her 4 tendencies, personalities, which defines how you react to expectations, inner and outer expectations. And she learned a lot about that from her research on motivation. So really cool stuff.
Better than before. I'm gonna check that out for sure.
Enjoy it.
It sounds great. One of the other things, going back to that idea that we can do anything we want at any point in our lives, that there's nothing holding us back except ourselves. We often get in our own way. One of my favorite books is by Shonda Rhimes, who writes Grey's Anatomy and Getting Away with Murder, and I can't remember the other ones. Really, really amazing writer. She had a book that she put out called The Year of Yes. And oh my gosh, I give it to everybody because and it's one of those books. I read it on Kindle and then went out and bought it because I
Yeah,
felt so
yeah,
strongly about it.
those kind of books, right?
Oh, and the whole book is about just saying yes. And she spent a year moving out of her comfort zone and saying yes to things that she would have never said yes to before. And the transformation that she went through in every aspect of her life is phenomenal. And
I'm excited to read that, because I often find myself saying I need to say no more often, but it depends, so that'll be a fascinating balance.
well, and she says no to certain things,
Good.
and there's some things, that it's all about, like, who are you inviting onto your island?
Good
You
point.
know?
Love that analogy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, you can still be friends with people, but there are people who drain you and there are people who fill you up. And you get to decide who comes on your island, who is in that personal tribe of yours. And I went to I have an ornament exchange party every year, where I invite a bunch of women, and we wrap a really ornate or gaudy or whatever ornament, and we, the way you wrap it really matters, and we draw numbers, and then you can steal it up to 3 times. And I just had it on Saturday night, and every time I get together with my tribe, I am humbled. I am absolutely humbled, and I feel so incredibly blessed because these women are amazing, and they're all different, and they're from all different aspects of my life, but they are wonderful, remarkable, amazing women. And so you get to decide who's in your tribe. And so that's the whole idea of who do you invite onto your island, and but yes, when you read this book, you're just gonna feel so incredibly inspired. And one of the things that I don't swear very much, but one of the things that she says that I absolutely love is own your badass self. I'm like, yeah, because the whole idea is that we shrink ourselves, we make ourselves smaller. And she's saying, no, I didn't get here because of luck. I didn't get here because of who I knew. I got here because I worked my booty off.
Absolutely. And
You
and
know?
and I'm looking it up. I'm reminded of the Marianne Williamson quote. Our deepest fear is that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And
Yep.
that
Yep.
thing about saying yes to our
Yep.
largeness.
I always like to end the podcast asking women, if you could give one piece of advice to the listeners today, what would you tell them?
Be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. I just think that so often in our attempts to please others, to seek approval, to seek whatever, that we forget our true values. And when we are true to ourselves, we manifest that authenticity that is really appealing to other people. People will, it's like a magnet when you're real.
Yeah.
And so that would be what I would share.
I love it. I love it. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today. You have been such a delight. And like I said, you are an inspiration to women my age and others. I mean, I just think, wow, I look at you and I'm awestruck. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us on the Queens of Moxie podcast. I hope that you found it inspirational and that it helps you to think about how you can step into joy and live your authentic life. And remember, we have a weekly email so that you don't miss any of these episodes. Plus, it starts your Monday out with an inspirational quote and a beautiful image. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.